Welcome back. You're watching WION. We're going to continue our discussion about how Afghanistan is watching the US elections. We've lost our guest in Kabul, but we're going to continue this discussion here in the studio and try and get our senior journalist back. But in the meantime, my colleague Surya, let's talk about how Donald Trump is viewed in Afghanistan. Do you think he's really well known there? Do you think there's any idea about what his sort of policies are towards Afghanistan?
I think he would be known in the context of the kind of remarks he's made about Muslims and terrorism, etc. But has he made any remarks on Afghanistan specifically? I'm not very sure. And I don't think Trump really is a foreign policy guy. I mean, he's a businessman, He knows how to run a corporation. But in terms of foreign policy, I don't think he's really expressed himself on that score. And frankly, why should he? At this point when he's fighting to get elected, why should he get into areas which are deeply sensitive, And America has lost a lot of lives out there. Now he's talked of rebuilding the military and sorting out the ISIS. So in the same tone, he could have even referred to the Taliban. He never did. So there are clearly some sensitivities over there which he has to observe. And I think he's just being careful.
Yeah, because we were speaking during the break actually about why, for example, in the presidential debates, we saw a lot of discussion about Islamic State, about Syria, about Iraq. There was no mention of Afghanistan. Why do you think the two candidates either stayed away from that, or why do you think it didn't even come up?
Well, I think it's because they've lost so many lives there. And frankly, after so many years of spending so many $1 billion, they're no closer to stabilizing that country. The current government of Abdul Ghani in Afghanistan is very weak. The Taliban have a presence now in practically every state in that country. And the opium production is going to touch record highs again this year. And add to that, you have Pakistan, which has not been restrained in any manner. They are doing exactly what they want to do. And the Americans don't seem to have any ideas as to how to end this entire thing. Do they want to build in more troops? Do they want to target Pakistan, as the Afghans are now telling them? Do they want to rebuild the Afghan military and take an active role in fighting off Taliban attacks? We have no clarity on that score, and frankly, I don't think in the current campaign you're going to have any. Anyway, the campaign is now over. It's over to the next president. I think we'll start knowing some idea as to where US policy is going, only after the inauguration in January.
We talked about those controversial comments that Donald Trump made about Muslims. If we sort of broaden this out, if he becomes president, how difficult is it going to be for him to engage with countries like Afghanistan that have a large Muslim population? Surely they're just going to be very sort of unsure about him from the very get-go.
No, I think the world can be unsure of Trump, but at the end of the day, every American president is also constrained by the agencies around him, by Congress, in the entire balance of power thing within Washington itself. There are agencies there. There's the Pentagon, there's the Department of State, there's Congress, there's his own party. So he'll be looking at all these issues. They will each give him advice. And in that sense, whatever policy emerges will take into account the general consensus on how to forge a policy that is workable, At the end of the day, as US president, as the man who's the leader of the so-called free world, Trump will understand that he has a duty to stabilize that country. How he does that, is he going to send in more troops? Well, all that is a matter of speculation right now.
We were discussing before the break that Hillary Clinton is largely seen as probably going to, on the foreign policy terms, she's perhaps more hawkish, but is generally going to continue Barack Obama's policies. How would you rate Barack Obama's policy over the last 8 years in Afghanistan?
Well, I think as I mentioned earlier, his policy has been minimalist. He did order a surge of troops, 100,000 odd troops. That was very short term, and they were subsequently pulled back. Today he's down to around 10,000 or 8,000 odd troops, and they are confined to a training role. But we also know that special forces are pretty active there, and they have acted on behalf of the Afghan military whenever they are in a process of suffering a reverse somewhere. The point is he going to expand this? The point is the new president going to expand on this? And at the end of the day, the key question here is, how do you stabilize this country? How do you ensure that Pakistan doesn't interfere? How do you ensure that opium production goes down and you have some alternative for the Afghan people? These questions need to be resolved by the new administration. I think in that sense, Obama has just been kind of waiting and watching and not wanting to take any risks.
Do you see that continuing, though? Because there's clearly very little appetite in terms of, you were talking about the over 2,000 people killed in Afghanistan, more deaths in Iraq. Is there any appetite for sort of interventionism in American society at the moment? Can a president actually take the sort of action that we saw George W. Bush, for example, taking?
I don't think the American people have any stomach for that. I think, if anything, this campaign has shown that there is no appetite for those kind of grand, things about remaking the world. But Hillary has talked of interventionists, but she hasn't talked really of taking on the ISIS or sending in troops into Afghanistan again. She's been rather delightfully vague in that sense. She has talked of no-fly zone in Syria. How she's going to enforce it, heaven only knows. And I think the current policy of helping the the Iraqi forces in taking on ISIS will perhaps continue. Perhaps she will, if she becomes president, she will step up that. But beyond that, I don't see what they're going to do in Syria or Afghanistan. There is no clarity there.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. But Surya, Gangadharan, thank you very much for your time. And we're going to have to leave it there. But after a quick news bulletin, we'll be discussing the US elections and how they might influence Sri Lanka. Stay with us for that.